States in the U.S. are dealing with pandemic issues after a big winter wave of Omicron cases in the new year. New cases of the coronavirus are dropping around the country, but hospitals in certain areas remain overwhelmed and understaffed. And the U.S. death rate from COVID remains high. More than 2,200 people are dying every day. And blanketing these are very serious pandemic issues leading up to the upcoming midterm elections. This has Democrats on their toes trying to keep their slim majorities in Congress, while Republicans look for ways to gain an advantage. Joining me now on these topics and more is North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Governor Cooper, thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and start with the elections. On Friday, the big news is your veto of a Republican bill to push North Carolina's primaries from May to June. The date is in question due to an upcoming redistricting case with the state Supreme Court. Tell our viewers who may not be as up to speed about North Carolina politics about the case and why you felt it was important to keep the election date where it is.
Well, people ought to choose the politicians instead of other way around. And we have technologically diabolical, extreme partisan gerrymandering by the North Carolina state legislature, both in our legislative seats and our congressional seats. And the state Supreme Court is about to decide on the constitutionality of those districts. I think most people believe that districts should be fair so that everybody's vote counts. And we know that we have a very tight timeline until our primary. So I vetoed the bill because I believe that the court should take the time that they need to make sure that these districts are constitutional, and the court can set the filing and the primary date when they make these decisions.
Governor Cooper, why does North Carolina seem to be in constant litigation over redistricting? How can this problem, both in your state and in others, really be fixed?
We have been ground zero for those kinds of things. And, you know, back in 2010, when Republicans took over the state legislature for the first time in 100 years, you have seen partisan gerrymandering and a number of lawsuits after that. Look, we should have an independent redistricting committee that should decide these. Yeah, Democrats used to control it, and Democrats should have done that at the time, too. But now with the advent of the computer and the technology that can be used to go house by house, you can draw districts that are extremely unfair. Like in North Carolina, this is pretty much a 50-50 state. You can see 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats out of these congressional districts. And that's not right in anybody's eyes, really, except for the legislators that are controlling the drawing of these lines. So we need to have an independent commission put in place, and I hope that we can do that at some point soon.
Governor, you're the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. President Biden's approval rating is in the low 40s. How concerned are you about the upcoming elections for Democratic candidates?
Well, first, governors are some of the most important elected officials in our country. We are CEOs. We get things done. And I'd say from the get-go that governors are more insulated from national politics. Like U.S. senators get a lot of attention, governors have to get stuff done. And our Democratic incumbents who have worked so hard to fight this pandemic and who have worked to transform their economies and get us out of this, these governors, I think, will be rewarded with re-election. I think President Biden's administration has done an amazing job passing transformational legislation that's going to provide high-speed internet access, going to help parents with child care, that's going to help the economy too, going to help build new water systems. And I think that people are just so frustrated right now with the pandemic that clouds most everything that they're looking at. They're mad at whoever's in charge. But I'll tell you this, we're getting more shots in arms. We're seeing this Omicron variant begin to subside and to go down. I believe in the coming months we'll be pulling out of this pandemic and be even stronger than before. And I think that people are going to take a better and better view of the Biden administration. People throughout his career have tried to say that Joe Biden's down and out, and he's prove them wrong. And I think his passion for good, his perseverance, his continuing effort to pull people from both parties together will win out in the end. And I feel really good about Democratic governors and their chances across this country in 2022.
Well, Governor Cooper, you're talking about getting more shots in arms on the pandemic. You have said North Carolinas must learn how to live with the virus. COVID cases in your state seem to be heading down after a significant surge. Cases there are still 120% higher than last winter, though. Did you make the right call to steer away from mandates?
We're in a much different place than we were 2 years ago. We now know the way out of this pandemic, and it's vaccines. Being vaccinated and boosted can help protect you from getting the virus, but more importantly, if you do get it, which a lot of people do even though they've been vaccinated, a vaccinated and boosted person is going to be protected much more from severe illness. And I think right now we are at the point where we have to put our focus on vaccines and testing. And if you look at North Carolina, there were statistics a few months ago saying North Carolina ranked among the lowest states in both COVID deaths and job loss per capita. I think we've taken the right approach, knowing that we've got to recover from this economically, and I believe in North Carolina that we have in many years. We just had a record jobs year. We got to pay attention to vulnerable communities, and we got to keep getting people vaccinated. I think that's going to pull us through. We want to get this virus to the endemic stage so we can be living with it and keeping people as well as possible and making sure our economy is strong and kids are learning in school.
All right, Governor Cooper, so we're talking about the upcoming elections. We've discussed the legislation that was passed as part of what Democrats are going to campaign on. We discussed the pandemic and economy, but there's obviously another big factor in an upcoming campaign. And after Virginia's recent gubernatorial election, you said that candidates, Democratic candidates, should not make former President Trump the central focus. How do you actually motivate Democratic voters this year? You just said that it's anger and that people are feeling that type of passion. I'm not sure if other Democrats are going to agree that talking about the legislation that was passed is going to energize enough Democratic voters, especially when you're looking at an increasingly energized Republican base.
We've got to meet people where they are, and making sure that parents have child care, children have a good education, people's grandparents are being cared for, that they have a good paying job. All of these are critical issues, but we cannot ignore the fact, and I'll agree with you, that we've got a lot of Republicans who would prefer to have an autocracy as long as their guy is in charge. And that means that Democrats have to rally to elect governors to be able to stop this bad state legislation that might be encouraged because of former President Trump, or may be encouraged by this U.S. Supreme Court that may be stripping away women's right to choose, voting rights, environmental safeguards. So I think all of those issues are important to talk about to the people of these respective states. And governors' races are different. I think each of our Democratic governors will be looking at talking to the people of their states about what matters most. And it's obviously going to be very important that we energize Democrats, that we energize independents, and that, like in the case of my state, I believe that we've been able to pull some Republicans over to a competent governor who knows how to get things done. And we got a lot of Democrats across this country that fit that bill.
Governor Cooper, I want to follow up on this point, though, because the comments that I referenced came after Virginia's election. Since then, and just happening this weekend, was President Trump floating the idea that he may be running in 2024 and saying that there is an incentive for people who were part of the insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th. I want to give you an opportunity to comment on that.
Well, Republicans are at war with themselves right now. President Trump has recruited and endorsed candidates in governor's races across the country, and 11 of the 15 incumbent Republican governors have primary challenges, and a lot of that has to do with President Trump. And that is having an effect, I believe, of dividing Republicans. We're going to stick to the issues that matter most to the people in the states across the country. I think obviously the specter of him being out there and potential candidate in 2024 causes great concern. And it's all the more reason for people to elect Democratic governors across the country.
All right, Governor Cooper, before I let you go, I want to also give you an opportunity to talk about the Supreme Court. President Biden has promised to nominate a black woman to fill Justice Stephen Breyer's seat. We know you're a supporter of North Carolina Justice Sherry Beasley. Do you think that the president should pick her for the Supreme Court?
Well, I appointed Sherry Beasley as Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. She is an outstanding jurist, and I know that she would do a spectacular job on the United States Supreme Court. Right now, Sherry has rolled up her sleeves and is running for the United States Senate in North Carolina. I've endorsed her. Obviously, the president is going to end up making this decision about who goes on the Supreme Court. Sherry would be a very qualified and capable Supreme Court candidate, but I like her. I like her running for the United States Senate in North Carolina right now.
Sounds like you'd be happy with her in either of those positions.
No doubt.
All right, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, thank you for joining.